Hello, my name is Dr. Liam Schubel, and welcome to another edition of Schubel Vision Elite Interviews, where today we'll be interviewing Dr. Thom Gelardi, the founder of Sherman College of Chiropractic, and I'm joined here with my friend Dr. Frankie Hahn and Dr. Judd Nogrady of the Schubel Vision Elite team. Enjoy the interview. So, Thom, you graduate from Palmer College in Davenport in 1957. What happens then?
Well, we graduated in January of 57. And a few weeks later, Betty and I got married. And then when I was in school, there was a draft on, a military draft. But if you were in the healing art profession, you could get deferred, which we did have a deferment then. But I didn't want to do anything to start a practice or anything else and then have to be drafted. So I went down and requested draft. So I had to go for a physical. And I didn't pass the physical because of my heart. So there was, okay, so now we'll focus on going into practice. And that's when I worked at the defense company in Connecticut. When I was in junior high school, you had 6 weeks of woodwork shops, 6 weeks of print shops, 6 weeks of drafting. And so I signed on as a draftsman.
Okay, so now you're doing drafting part-time and chiropractic practice part-time?
No. Yeah. I was just trying to make money.
Oh, to save to be a chiropractor.
I was living in the basement. Betty and I were living in the basement of my sister's house.
Okay.
And she was working at the hospital. She was a nurse. She was there. I think you're doing obstetrics, I believe. You're doing obstetrics in New York or surgical nursing.
I started at Mount Vernon for 2 weeks in obstetrics, and then I went on a per diem basis at Bronxville because I made more money.
Okay. So she was working at local hospital in New York.
For what, like $57 a week? Is that kind of what, just to give us an idea of what the finances were at this point?
I think I made 62 a week in New York at Bronxville Hospital.
But South Carolina, 62 in New York, but it was less than there.
Okay, so you're working as a draftsman to save money to start a chiropractic office. Your wife Betty is working as a nurse. She's bringing in, $50, $60 a week.
That was pretty good.
Which was good money, huh? Okay.
Oh, for nurses, made quite well.
All right.
$62 a week.
There you go. Wow. Okay. So you're saving this massive amount of money, right? With the nursing salary and your draftsman salary. How is it that you come about then to open your first practice? Where is it? And tell me some of the dynamics of opening up a practice. Where'd you get the money? How did it all happen?
Well, my dad said if I would practice in New York, Mount Vernon, New York, that he would lend me $2,000 to go into practice, which again, you have to multiply that by 15. That would be equivalent to $30,000 a day. I wanted to be where Dr. Sherman was because I thought I would be learning a great deal from Dr. Sherman. And I wanted to continue. He was a mentor of mine. And I wanted to follow him and go to South Carolina. But after being in New York for about 8 months or so, my father started feeling sorry for me and said, well, go ahead, I'll lend you the $2,000, to go and practice, and you could go on down to South Carolina.
Ah, okay. So did you practice in New York then, or you went straight to?
No, I never practiced in New York.
That's interesting. Okay, so you went right from you went back to New York to save money, and then you went down to South Carolina to be around in the sphere of influence of Dr. Lyle Sherman.
Yes.
Got it.
That's right. Because I knew there's no point going in practice in New York because I knew before I left Palmer, before I graduated, that I wanted to follow Dr. Sherman.
Got it. So we're talking 1957 still, and now you're probably, right? And now you're in Gaffney. You've chosen Gaffney now as a place to practice because that puts you in the sphere of influence of Dr. Lyle Sherman. You like the small town environment there, and you open up a practice?
That's correct.
Okay. And is it legal to practice chiropractic at this point in South Carolina?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, it's been legal for some time.
Okay.
And they went through it. That's an interesting thing, too, how it became legal.
Great.
And there was a chiropractor in South Carolina who was arrested for practicing chiropractic, and he was put in jail.
Got it.
And he went to a young attorney, Olin Johnson, famous attorney with World War II, because Roosevelt came down to Spartanburg, where Olin Johnson lived, and to discuss the atomic bomb progress.
Wow.
That was being designed at that time in his lifetime. And Olin Johnson was just out of law school. And he said to the chiropractor, that he would take that case, because people didn't even want to be associated taking the case of a chiropractor.
Got it.
But he took the case and they lost, and the chiropractor had to serve a jail sentence.
Okay.
But Olin Johnson said, I'm thinking about running for the House of Representatives. So he said, when you get out of jail, you run for the House of Representatives, and we'll get a law for chiropractic, which they did. They ran, and then they both got elected, and they got a law passed for chiropractic in South Carolina.
Wow.
Now, Betty was just in the grocery store about a week ago and was standing in line. She hadn't seen Olin Johnson's daughter for some years, so she didn't recognize her quite off, but when she did, they introduced each other again and renewed their friendship.
Interesting.
Because she was very instrumental, the daughter was very instrumental in helping Sherman College, and she became a congresswoman also.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yes. And she was very, very helpful to Sherman. So, and Olin Johnson was always friendly when he was alive, and he knew Dr. Sherman and so on.
Okay.
They were all, well, he had a long association helping the person get out of jail and getting the law passed.
Mm-hmm.
So he was frequently at chiropractic meetings, still a supporter of chiropractic.
So that's good that his name is mentioned here, because he was pivotal in the advancement of chiropractic, certainly in South Carolina.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And he's famous as far as World War II. Anyone who knows World War II history, they probably know of Olin Johnson.
Look at that. That's the connection with chiropractic in South Carolina. Who knew,
yes,
right?
Right.
So it's legal to practice chiropractic in South Carolina. You open up your practice in Gaffney, South Carolina. Any interesting stories with that as far as opening, maybe some cases that you had?
I saw a mill house.
Mm-hmm.
In South Carolina, the cotton mills, that's all there was in South Carolina, were cotton mills. And so there was someone living in it after they stopped that custom where the mill owned the country store and you rented the house from them. So they had almost complete control over someone's life. But anyway, there was a person who owned that house who had just built a home, and that was up for sale. So I went to see him and I said, I could rent it. And he said, no, I need to sell it. So the next day I'd go back and talk to him again. He said, no, he had to sell it. And I thought, well, what could I say to him? So I knew the place, I think, would rent around $40 a month and I thought we could live there and practice there for $40 a month. Maybe it was a little bit more than that, but I said I would give him $10 or $15 more per month if he would just rent it to me. And he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I got to have the house under a GI Bill. I'll just transfer it over to you. And then you could take over the bank payments under the GI Bill. And when you get going, you could give me the down payment. I said, okay, fine, I'll sign those papers. Says, I don't need papers. I'm just going to shake your hand. So I thought, wow, just a stranger driving into town, but he just shook my hand and so on. I didn't know how well known he was in the town. He was a coroner, but just a popular individual. He also part-time coroner and a full-time salesman of auto insurance, Allstate auto insurance. But he took me and introduced me every place, got me into the JCs, put me into the Lions Club. I started working on the county, the Boy Scout Council. It was called a district because there were 6 counties into the council. But the district, I later became chairman of the district Boy Scout thing, and was influential in the JCs. But he helped me get started. His son had Down syndrome, and he was 5 years old, I believe. He was in preschool, in a church preschool, but he could stumble over his feet. He couldn't walk without, he could walk, but he'd fall down frequently, and he was very cross-eyed and always preoccupied with something. You know, if you talked to him, you couldn't get his attention. But anyway, I told Jack Millwood was his name. And as you drive into, if you ever drive down there, you see the big peach on I-85. Well, that peach is in Millwood Park. They named that park after my friend Jack Millwood. And just about every weekend, if we were not with Dr. Earl Taylor, we were with the Millwoods frequently. But he took me all around, ushered me into town, introduced me to everybody in town. So he had a great influence. But I told him about chiropractic, and he said, well, would you get my son under your care? So we started with him, and soon he and his wife, they had adopted the boy. But anyway, the family became patients. His eyes started to straighten out, started walking better. Went to school. He was not very good in math, but he could spell words like a savant, backwards and forwards. Anyway, he spell Washington backwards.
Wow.
He'd spell it backwards, you know, with his ability. He could play the piano some, and he drove a car. And Jack later on built him a little business where he sold hamburgers and hot dogs and ice cream and things of that nature. So he ran his business. He ran a business and became self-sufficient.
Okay.
I can't say exactly self-sufficient, but almost.
Yeah. Highly functional, you'd say.
Oh, yeah. And Jack just thought, well, that was a miracle, you know, and which I thought so too.
Yeah. Well, you know, Napoleon Hill had a child that was very much benefited by chiropractic care as well.
Hearing. And you know, Napoleon Hill is buried in Gaffney.
I did not know that.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
He lived in Greenville. I met him. I've been to his home.
Really?
In Greenville, yes.
Oh, well, tell us that story while we have you on the line here. How did you meet Napoleon Hill?
Well, I knew the connection with BJ. He spoke at Lyceums, BJ's Lyceums. Did you know that?
No.
Oh, yeah, he spoke at Lyceums. And he was real proud that sometime he could get more newspaper columns than BJ got because he said, I knew how to work newspapers. And so he was a very popular speaker there at Lyceums for BJ. But I heard about that, and I went down to Greenville and to ask him if he would speak at the JCs, and which he agreed to. So he came to the Gaffney JCs and spoke to them. And he was a speechwriter for President Roosevelt.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
He said that he gave Roosevelt the statement, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself."
Wow.
And he says he wrote a number of speeches, but that was his job, was writing speeches for Roosevelt.
How's that for an exclusive, huh?
Yeah.
We have nothing to fear but fear itself. I didn't know that. That's Napoleon Hill.
Later on, when he was elderly, and there's a nice elderly lady in Gaffney that they decided to get married. And so when he died, he lived in Gaffney toward the end of his days, and he's buried there in Gaffney.
That's interesting. You know,
I got a letter from Napoleon Hill too.
You do?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, I definitely like to see a photo of that. Yeah, you know, he just had a book that was released a short time ago about something in the devil. I forget the exact title of the book.
Outwitting.
What was it? Outwitting the Devil. It was called Outwitting the Devil, and his wife wouldn't let him publish it at the time because they felt that it was going to cause such an uproar and that he might even be killed, you know, because of the religious fervor of the time, and that was just, you didn't want to touch that topic. So that's interesting. So I didn't realize that he was from there. Very, very interesting. Who was Dr. Lyle Sherman?
I have never been able to call him Lyle Sherman, but anyway.
That's kind of how I feel. You insist that I call you Thom, but I always want to call you Dr. Gelardi.
All my patients and all the students always call me Thom. So I like that. I got that from BJ, being called by the first name.
Okay.
And also, I sometimes think that titles are sometimes used to divide people and so on. So I was always happy with being called Thom. But anyway, Dr. Sherman, where I come in on the story, I know when he was courting his wife and had to have his mother-in-law with him during the courting process. But he was an engineering student in Galesburg, Illinois. And I think that's probably where Mrs. Sherman grew up. And he went to Knox College, and Knox College is where the famous Lincoln-Douglas debate took place.
Oh, okay.
Lincoln and Douglas had a series of debates, but the most famous of all was at Knox College. But he was studying engineering. Mm-hmm. But Dr. Sherman also was a classical musician with classical piano and so on. In those days, too, just as an odd job, when they had the silent movies, he would play the piano during different exciting parts and so on, make up the music as the movie went along.
Oh, wow.
But as a student, he some way came down with a condition called quinsy. And it comes in through the throat. To me, it kind of reminds me, I've never heard of it before and never heard of it since, but sort of reminds me somewhat like polio, only said it was ascending paralysis. It starts almost in the legs and works its way up. And so here he is married, newly married, in school, and now he's paralyzed from the neck down.
Golly.
Prior to this, after getting married, they moved and they lived in Montana. And his wife had some type of problem and went to a chiropractor in Montana. Mm-hmm. And then I think he became a patient also. And he made friends with a Dr. Pardis, whose grandson's a chiropractor up here in the Northeast sometime.
In the Philippines.
Pardon?
In the Philippines.
You know him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, he went to his granddad, Pardis's granddad. They liked chiropractic and so on, maybe for symptom relief or whatever. So they moved to Galesburg, where he studied engineering, and he's a pianist also. And Mrs. Sherman went to college also. And I can't remember what they call it, expression. You got a degree in expression, but it's public speaking and so forth. And she taught a lot of famous chiropractors when they were in Davenport how to speak. Huh. But anyway, Dr. Sherman said he's under medical care, and now he's paralyzed from the neck down. The medical doctor came in, and he shook his head. He said, "This really kills slowly." Oof. Well, then something clicked. And they got in touch with Dr. Pardis. And Dr. Pardis said, "Get to Davenport and see Dr. Chance, famous family in chiropractic. Chance taught neurology." So anyway, the neighbors would carry Dr. Sherman out to the car and load the car up because Sherman and his wife were raising chickens and selling the eggs to help them get through school.
Got it.
So they would sell eggs, she said, on the way to Davenport. And then the students would take Sherman out of the car, carry him up to Chance's office, and get an adjustment. And he began healing. And got well, finally. But she was taken back, I don't know how often each week or so, and but being totally paralyzed. And I find, too, that I've seen this with a lot of people, they'll have a particular health problem that's there, and they get into chiropractic, and maybe the health problem starts to go away, but their health goes above it, and they don't have any symptoms, and it doesn't give them, the weakness is still there.
Yeah.
And so forth. Because as Dr. Sherman, toward the end of his life, some of those symptoms came back, but he never was troubled with it all of his life till the very end.
Yeah.
So that weakness was there, I believe.
It's interesting. Yeah, it kind of associates itself. Now, the big study is heart rate variability, the ability to adapt. So in other words, he may have had the damaged tissue, but he was adapting to it better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you see that quite often. I think in my own problem with having a heart problem, and I said, well, I don't believe chiropractic is going to grow new valves because the scar tissue on the lining of your heart from the bacterial endocarditis. And I don't think, how could chiropractic help that?
Right.
I don't know how it helped it.
Right.
And I told students I'd like to be there for the postmortem, And they said, you will. I said, you'll be there. But anyway.
You have to give us a full report on that one. That'll be a different type of interview.
Well, Dr. Sherman got his health back, and then he decided to be a chiropractor. And it was 18-month curriculum at that time.
Wow.
Went to school. And then he decided that he wanted to go into practice. But it was getting close to the war, or maybe the war had started. And BJ said to him that, we're losing faculty and so on due to the war. Would you stay on the faculty?
Yeah.
Someone did. Maybe it was Dr. Hender,
Mm-hmm.
who was a medical doctor at that time.
Yeah.
The obstetrician who delivered Sherman's children. And so he stayed on. He said, I'll stay on till the war, the end of the war. And when the war was over, then Palmer, he was working over at the research center, and Palmer said, with all the GIs coming back to be educated and all the influx of the changes that are taking place, don't leave right now, wait till we get settled.
Right.
So he stayed. And then somewhere in the early 50s, because I started school in 1954, and he had already left school for several years. But as his daughters, he had two daughters, and they were getting ready for college. And he said, the pay was very, very small for faculty. It still is very small, but it was. So he said to BJ, I've got to leave now. I've got to spend all my time in private practice because my two daughters are going to want to go to college,
right,
and so on. So he was in private practice. And for the first time I heard him, just about a year before I graduated, maybe 9 months or so before I graduated, he came and gave a lecture, and then we met. But now he became assistant director of the B.J. Palmer Research Clinic. And he did a lot of the adjusting. BJ was taking off the winters to go to Florida. He spent his winters in Florida, and he ran that area. And the 6 cases, I believe, it's in one of his books, 8 cases. Those were cases that Dr. Sherman wrote up. So his name's not even attached to that.
No, it's not. And so let me ask you this. So he was the assistant director of the B.J. Palmer Research Clinic?
Yes.
And B.J. was the director?
Yes.
Okay. And this was before you arrived at chiropractic college. Is that correct?
Oh, long before.
Long before.
Yeah.
Okay. What years were we talking about? A ballpark estimate, would you say? The 30s or the 40s?
I would guess
the
late 30s.
Late 30s. Okay. And so when you met him, that's like today, successful practitioners coming back to the school to share with students. If he had just gone and his merry way and practiced in Spartanburg, there's no way a guy from New York would ever be down in Spartanburg, South Carolina, right? I mean,
that's right.
It was because he decided to come back and give back to the students. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Got it.
Without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Wow. How that changes the course of history. Just coming back and giving a talk as a successful chiropractic practitioner, coming back and sharing with the students.
BJ said, we never know how far-reaching something we may think, say, or do today will affect the lives of millions tomorrow. And I know one lady that I met on a plane and told her about chiropractic, and she later came to Sherman College, and she's doing a great job up in New England.
That's amazing. So, yeah. Well, we hope you enjoyed that interview with the founder of Sherman College, Dr. Thom Gelardi. This is Dr. Liam Schubel signing off with my good friends Dr. Frankie Hahn and Dr. Judd Nogrady. And we'll see you next time on the Schubel Vision Elite exclusive interview.